Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Catta, and I'm your host for this evening's webinar. This is the second in our ongoing series of webinars on the topic of safety strategies for seniors. And today we're blessed to have Sergeant Tanya Tremble from the Ontario Provincial Police here to speak with us about elder abuse and the law. Unfortunately, Sergeant Tremble.
Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Tanya Tremble, and I am a detective sergeant with the Ontario Provincial Police. I've been with the Ontario Provincial Police for about 23 years, and I have different backgrounds.
Sorry about that. I jumped ahead of myself. Unfortunately, Sergeant Tremble can't join us today, but we have recorded her session previously, and that's what we're going to play for you today. So sit back and relax, enjoy the presentation, and towards the end, you can submit your questions. In the Zoom webinar, there is a feature at the bottom for a Q&A. And if you do have questions, then you can post them there. And afterwards, we're going to have Sergeant Tremble reply to those, and we'll actually send those out as a follow-up email along with the link to the recording. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. And then when it's finished, we can go into a Q&A session.
I was frontline for 13 years. And then I went into the Ontario Sex Offender Registry where I worked for 3 years. And then after that, I moved into behavioral sciences. So I worked in behavioral sciences as a threat assessor for 5 years. And what was interesting about that is I got to see the world through a different lens, and I got to see different risk factors and how they impact us. So about a year ago, I made a transition into the Regional Abuse Issues Coordinator position here in Central Region. And I explore various types of abuse within the community. Child abuse, elder abuse, sex assault, intimate partner violence. I also look after the mental health piece as well as human trafficking. But today I'm happy that you're here to join me in gaining some insight and exploring abuse and the law. Now, some of the topics I'm going to be discussing may be upsetting to you, but it's important for us to know and have that awareness so we can assist older adults and older persons within our communities, whether it's a family member, a neighbor, or maybe you work in a facility and you're seeing signs of abuse. So we're going to go through this slideshow, and I'm going to discuss each slide, but I'm also going to give some examples. And then at the end, we'll look at a quick video, and then I will give you some contact information. So if you ever have any further questions or concerns, you can reach out. So we'll get started with the slides. So abuse is any action or inaction by any person which causes harm, threats of harm, or jeopardizes the health or well-being of another person. So when we think about abuse, anyone can be a victim. We look at our vulnerable persons in our communities, though, such as our older adults, but kids as well. Those who aren't able to maybe stand up for themselves as much as they would like to, or they're isolated, or they have the inability to reach out to others, or the inability to communicate what exactly is happening to them. So I want you to think about these questions as we go through the presentation, because it will stimulate some thought and maybe raise some questions that you can reflect either upon yourself or others in the community. Are you afraid of anyone at your place of residence? So we're talking about those individuals that you're living with or who are providing you care. Has anyone at your place of residence ever hurt you? And we'll go into the specifics of that shortly. Has anyone ever forced you to do things you didn't want to do? Has anyone ever failed to help you take care of yourself when you needed help? And we're going to explore that in depth, because some people overlook what neglect is. However, it takes place in our communities and our society. So if we have that awareness, we will be able to identify it and either offer help or seek help. Have you ever signed any documents that you didn't understand? And this is very important when you're dealing with estate matters, or if you're dealing with power of attorney issues. You need to understand what you're signing. And if you don't, then don't sign the documents. If someone is forcing you to sign those documents, then there's an issue. Who makes decisions about your life? How or where you should live? Or maybe, are you allowed outside? Are you not allowed outside? Are you allowed to wear certain clothes or not? Do you need some help with, and that could be a variety of things. Do you need help with your groceries? Do you need help with self-care? Do you need help with communication, banking? Is it hard for you to look after? So throughout our life, we have different experiences, and we're independent, and we have that ability to carry on and look after ourselves. But at some point in time, due to various reasons, something may happen and we're unable to look after ourselves, or we may be suffering from a disease that may be impacting us, such as dementia, Alzheimer's. All those affect us. So we need to have those supporting persons around us and looking out for our best interests, not theirs. So many people will say, well, Tanya, can you tell me what an abuser looks like? And I have to say, anyone can be a potential abuser. So a spouse, a family member, a personal caregiver or staff in a residential group setting, hospital workers, a friend, a neighbor, anyone who you rely on basic needs for, a stranger or a casual acquaintance, anyone who inserts themselves within your life and takes control and goes against your wishes is a potential abuser. So what can we look for? It's important to understand and have the insight as to what we're looking for, because if you don't know the signs, how do you identify the abuse? There are a number of signs that are common for most types of abuse. Each of these that we'll be discussing, when looking at the signs of abuse, one single sign will not necessarily indicate abuse is happening. However, we want to look at the situation in its totality. And that's where the police become involved, because we will do a thorough investigation. And think of it as an onion. When we peel back the layers of the onion, we're exposing more of the onion, and we're finding out exactly what is going on. So there's anxiety and depression, fear, isolation, sudden lack of interest in activities once enjoyed, unusual mood changes, being spoken for by the abuser, unwillingness to speak without first consulting with the abuser. So you will see a true power and control struggle going on. Unfortunately, older adults or older persons within our community that live independently and become isolated are at a higher risk of abuse. If you haven't seen that neighbor who resides alone in some time, do a quick door knock just to say hello. Is everything okay? And if you notice a change in their, what we describe as baseline behavior, so it's the common behavior that they've displayed around us previously. So I've known myself to be very happy all the time. But over the last few months, I've been very, very sad. And so if you as a neighbor notice, hey, you know what, Tanya's normally really happy, but the last few times I've spoken to her, she's been really sad and withdrawn, won't have eye contact with me. They may be experiencing a time of crisis. So that could be potential abuse, but it could also be other medical issues going on. But we as persons who are wanting to be supportive and looking out for older adults in our community can ask, do you need help? Is everything okay? And when we ask those open-ended questions, those broad questions, it allows the person to gain control of their situation and tell you what they want you to know. If you feel that abuse is occurring and that individual is unable to speak for themselves, contact police, or there are other external agencies that you can contact to assist and guide you down the path of seeking assistance for those older adults needing help within our communities. So we're going to go into the specific types of abuse, specific types of elder abuse, and that involves any act of violence by a person that causes physical injury or discomfort to another person. So physical abuse can range from slapping, shoving, severe beatings, restraints with ropes or chains. In some cases, when a relative or caregiver uses significant force to cause unnecessary pain or injury, regardless of the reason, the behavior can be resulted as abuse. So some people have asked, so Tanya, what is the section in the Criminal Code of Canada that speaks to elder abuse? So there is no specific elder abuse charge. It is, or it would be section 265 of the criminal code, which is known as assault. But if I'm dealing with an older adult, I articulate that in my report that the individual or the victim in this particular case is an older person who was assaulted. And then within our record management system, we code it as elder abuse. And then those codes are shared with Stats Canada. So when you see those reports coming out about elder abuse, and Stats Canada can give you specific numbers, it's because they've obtained statistics from police services, and not just the OPP, police services across Ontario and across Canada. So we have punching, pinching, slapping, squeezing, pushing, or any intentional rough handling. We also have unlawful confinement to a room, bed, chair, or home. Over or under medicating, as well as sexual abuse. So in some particular cases that we have investigated as police officers, some caregivers prevent the victim from leaving their home or rooms. They are kept from other family members, friends, under the impression that I'm doing this because it's in your best interest. In that particular case, the victim has lost control. Some victims are over-medicated to keep them sedated and less of a bother. Some caregivers, or those who are looking after an older person, may under-medicate, and then they keep the leftover medication for themselves. And we have had cases where in certain facilities, a caregiver has removed a pain patch or a fentanyl patch. They've removed it from the client. They've kept it for themselves. And then they've accumulated a variety of patches. And then they go out into the community and sell those patches for a benefit to themselves. What I've described so far is punishable by law under the section of assault and other various sections of the Criminal Code of Canada. Sexual abuse can range from exhibitionism, which is exposing one's sexual body parts for their own sexual gratification. Sexual abuse can also include inappropriate touching, photographing the person in suggestive positions, so they're actually staging the person to look a certain way, and then they're taking photos without their permission. They're forcing sexual contact, and actually any other non-consensual sexual behavior. So if someone is touching you and you are not wanting those touches, tell them to stop. If they continue, then you need to tell someone who you can trust, or if you can, contact police. So indicators of physical abuse, what can we be looking for? So unexplained and often repeated physical injuries, medical problems that go untreated, medication abuse, lack of food or dehydration, And I will give you an example, a recent one that I became privy to just in my role. There was an older person living in a residence with their grown older adult child. And that individual was to care for the older adult, however, had hired a PSW to come in and look after the older adult. The PSW had been speaking with the caregiver and had noticed that the older adult was on their last depends, their undergarments, and told the caregiver, you need to buy more and you need to be helping her change more often, because there was rashing going on, and the older adult had said that she had been feeling uncomfortable because her depends weren't being as changed as often as they should. That was brought to the attention of the caregiver following the weekend. The PSW returned. No new additional depends had been purchased, nor had there been any new depends placed on the older adult. And also, the PSW noticed a leg injury to the older person. And the older person said that they were in an extreme amount of pain, that she was told to go to her bed and not get out. And the PSW then learned that there was no running water within the home for the older person even to bathe herself. So the PSW saw all this going on and realized that the older adult needed help in seeking assistance and contacted police on her behalf. When the PSW did that, we then initiated an investigation, which then led to us speaking and holding the caregiver accountable for his behavior towards his mother. So psychological abuse. Any action or comment that may cause emotional anguish, fear, or diminish self-esteem or dignity of the victim. This one is often a difficult charge to prove and often cannot be prosecuted unless the use of threats or unlawful confinement accompanies this. However, that does not mean nothing can be done. For the police, if we are made aware of this, the safety and well-being of the victim is the first priority. So action will be taken, either to find the individual another place to reside, or intervention is then taken and other external partners are involved to ensure that the individual is receiving the proper care and that the psychological abuse is no longer exists. Because can you imagine every day waking up and having a loved one say to you, what a burden you are every day. And I wish that you would just hurry up and die. That causes a lot of emotional hurt and harm to the individual. And over a period of time, they start to truly believe what they're being told. So it's important that if someone discloses to you that they're experiencing psychological abuse, that you take action and not only support them, but let them know they're not alone and that there is help out there. So insults or humiliation, frightening, intimidation, or threatening, withholding of affection or companionship, being ignored, isolation from family or friends, harassing phone calls. What we can look for, those indicators, are unusual withdrawal from friends and or family, heightened levels of upset or agitation, discomfort or anxiety in the presence of particular people. So certain people are causing a trigger in them. So if I'm happy around these people, I can only assume that everything's okay. But if I'm fearful and scared and sad, I would be asking the person, last time I noticed so-and-so was over, you appeared scared and upset. And they may say, well, what do you mean? And I would explore it with them further. You may experience a reluctance to speak about the situation. You may also see or hear feelings of hopelessness and guilt. And you may also see a lack of confidence in the individual. So the abuser may call many times if they're not actually living with the victim, at any hour, any day, just to harass, humiliate, bother, belittle, or threaten the victim. This tactic is also used to deprive the victim of sleep. So if you have the landline of your telephone and your ringer's on and they're calling at all hours, that's waking you up. At least with cell phones, you can turn off the ringer, but they're wanting to disturb your sleep and keep you on edge. So the victim may be deprived of sleep because of too much noise or because they don't have an appropriate place to sleep. These actions have a significant impact on the emotional state of the victim. The victim may not want to contact family or friends, or they may not want to discuss the situation. Financial abuse. Unfortunately, we see a lot of this happening. And if this is in fact happening to you and you contact police and you are immediately told, well, this involves family members, it's a civil matter, it is not. So family abuse is the dishonest use of money, property, or assets belonging to the victim. This is a very, very common form of abuse against older adults within our communities. And it's very unfortunate that I have to say that, but it is a reality. So we need to take action. Although it can be committed by a stranger through taking advantage of the older person through home renovations or telemarketing, many times in our experience, it's a family member or a close friend or someone the older person has befriended who abuses their privileges and are exploiting money and assets from the older adult. Financial abuse can include fraud, forgery, and extortion. Another one that we see a lot of is misuse of power of attorney or forcing the victim to sign over or sell personal property. I became aware of an incident of this just recently. In fact, the older adult was living independently. A sibling was checking up on him due to the recent death of their mother. And the sibling sensed that there was something wrong, as the older adult had a social worker coming in, but he told the sibling that he had recently changed his power of attorney and had signed everything over to the social worker who was providing service. He also informed the sibling that he no longer wanted to speak with the sibling because the social worker had told him that it wasn't in his best interest to keep relations with his brother, that his brother did not have the best intentions for him, that in fact the social worker did have the best intentions. And the sibling saw a lot of red flags going on because the house that his brother was residing in was now being placed on the market for sale, which to the sibling was not ever discussed with him and his brother. And so the sibling had a lot of concerns as to how much power and control the social worker was assuming. We, in fact, were able to get some documentation that was created falsely by the social worker, which presented the documentation as legal documents authored by a lawyer, which in fact was not the case. So we had fraud going on at the time, and that led us to further criminal charges towards the social worker. So what can we look for indicators of financial abuse? Property in the home is disappearing, so people are helping themselves and then selling the older person's items to benefit not the older person, but themselves. And then the older person is told, oh, you must have misplaced it. Well, you are getting older, so I'm sure you just forgot where you had put it. Unacceptable. Again, it's an abuse of their role. They're misleading the older person and they're benefiting for themselves. There's also a paper trail. So unusual activity in bank accounts. Many times I have seen checkbooks being stolen, taken from the older person, and then the individual either having the person sign the checks or they themselves commit fraud by doing the signature of the older person on their behalf. There's also a diminished standard of living, not consistent with income or assets. The deed to the property has been signed over. Payments being paid late or not at all. And then, as we've already discussed, sudden or frequent changes to power of attorney and or the will. So if you are aware of the sudden or frequent changes, definitely red flags. So another situation I became aware of was an individual who was very financially stable, befriended a younger person. That younger person then told the older person that they were facing hard times. and that they were going to become homeless. That older person then moved the younger person into the home, at which time the younger person began to take advantage of the older person, demanding money, stealing his motor vehicle, buying groceries for herself and not for him. And there was also physical abuse taking place by the younger person then assaulting the older person. So a new person suddenly moving in, there's withholding of income taking place, larger than normal phone bills, frequent visits by door-to-door sales or home repair persons. So we get reports of door-to-door individuals being very aggressive. And when people are trying to say no and close the door, they're putting their foot in the door and they're forcing the door open. That is unacceptable behavior. And if that has happened to you, or if individuals have made threatening comments to you during those interactions, you need to call the police. We've touched upon this a little bit already with the neglect, but specifically, what is neglect? It's any action or inaction by anyone that fails to provide the basic or personal care needs and jeopardizes the safety or well-being of a person. So very, very broad. So we're gonna peel back the layers and see specifically what that means. So neglect includes denying that person any of the things that are essential to life. So food, water, clothing, medication, medical treatment, and other necessities, therapy, nursing service, equipment aids. So if an older person is dependent on hearing aids and an individual takes that away from them, knowing they need them, that is neglect. They require safe and comfortable conditions and a clean environment. Significant bathroom space for privacy and personal privacy space. Transportation to appointments. And being allowed to have visitation from friends or family members. So the older person is not in isolation and being deprived of that basic need of love and affection. When we look at some long-term homes, where the individual is being left and isolated or locked in a room for periods of time where they're not being checked on or provided food, definitely that is unacceptable and needs to be reported. Neglect actually has 3 types. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper and discuss those 3 types. There's active neglect, which is intentional behavior. It can include over or under medicating or confinement. And criminal offenses may apply to this particular type of neglect. Passive neglect, unintentional behavior, abusive but not deemed criminal, abusive but not deemed criminal, and usually involves lack of understanding or experience, illness, the caregiver themselves is actually experiencing medical issues, lack of support for the caregiver. So it's overwhelming and just too much. Self-neglect, so the inability to provide your own basic needs or make wise choices. Not criminal abuse, but still requires assistance. May be caused by physical infirmity, cognitive impairment, alcohol or drug dependency. So this is often seen in seniors who are living alone, suffering from various ailments, and are not receiving the assistance that they need. Indicators of neglect: unhealthy or unsafe living conditions, messy appearance, they appear unkept, they may be a little bit smelly, malnourishment or dehydration, poor hygiene, rashes, pressure sores. Indicators of over or under medicated, so unresponsive all the time because their medication is too much. Lack of medical appointments and an overall feeling of hopelessness. So you may ask why victims fail to report abuse. It's denial, it's disbelief, it's possibly shame. They're embarrassed. They're also feeling that they've been abandoned, there's isolation, or institutionalization has an impact on them. Dependency for food or shelter or clothing. They feel that there is no one else to care for them. They love the abuser. They know that the abuser is a good person at times. They will recall the good times and deny the bad. They don't want to break up the family. And again, as I said, there's the shame, embarrassment, there's the guilt, and there's confusion. Another impacting factor is multicultural beliefs or the distrust of police. Some older persons don't know their rights. They have a lack of understanding for the judicial system, lack of awareness for services available. They don't know who to talk to or who they can trust. There is a communication difficulty present. There's also the belief that older persons think that they're wasting the police time. And just know that that is not the case. We want you to call and reach out for help. We want you to ask questions, because if you don't know, where else are you going to find the answers? So don't hesitate to reach out to your local police service and seek those clarifying questions or ask for help, because it is absolutely not a waste of our time. So why do others not report abuse? So you may have someone saying, hey, not my problem, I'm not getting involved. I don't want to be a witness. I don't want to go to court. There's a fear of involvement. That person witnessing the abuse isn't sure who to contact. If they're an employer of an agency and they're seeing abuse taking place, their fear is then losing their job or being fired. There may be a lack of knowledge regarding normal aging. And then there is the denial of abuse by the victim because they've rationalized it and they've normalized it. So how can we look out for ourselves? We can do that by maintaining friendships and family relationships. We can participate in activities that you enjoy. Make sure your financial and legal affairs are in order. If you are in a position of being cared for and are unhappy with the care, tell someone that you trust. So you should be staying in contact with people around you and avoid becoming isolated. Those older persons who are isolated in the community are at a higher risk of abuse. Have a buddy, someone you trust who checks in on you and makes sure you are okay, and continue to participate in those activities that you enjoy. Maybe you think, hey, I'm getting a little bit older, I can't keep up with the younger ones. That's okay. Go at your own pace and maintain those friendships, because that is very, very valuable, not only for your mental well-being, but also for your safety. Make sure your financial and legal affairs are in order. Share your wishes with your family. If your affairs are not in order, hire a professional and ensure that professional is neutral and is not siding with family members, and is looking out for your best interests. Don't lend or give money to people you don't know. If you're being pressured by someone to do so, ask someone else for help and tell that person to stop. A lot of us are good-hearted, good-natured individuals, but be careful about who you allow into your home and who you live with. Remember, knowledge is power. Know your rights and ask for help if you don't understand. Learn to recognize some of the signs and indicators of abuse and act on those if you see them in someone you know. So I wanted to share caregiver fatigue awareness, and I'll be showing you a video shortly. It's one that we created a couple months ago, and it was just acknowledging that during these difficult times, if you're a caregiver, it can become overwhelming because we have our own lives and there's stressors that pop up that impact us while you're still trying to fulfill the role of caregiver to a loved one, or that is your role. That's your employment, is you are a caregiver. But sometimes it becomes overwhelming because we have a lot of other dynamics going on. So it's just a friendly reminder that it's okay to ask for help. And in order for us to take care of others, we need to take care of ourselves first. That's very important, because if we keep putting the needs of others ahead of ours first, we start to shut down, and maybe we aren't able to do the job that we're doing to the best of our ability. Maybe we try to cope with other things that aren't necessarily the best for us. So we start to use drugs, or we start to consume a little bit more alcohol, or we start forgetting about our own mental well-being. So it's important for us to look after ourselves and then be there for others. So we'll have a little look at that video now.
Everyone has a breaking point. If the stress of caregiving is left unchecked, it can take a toll on your health, relationship, and state of mind. This may lead to burnout, a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. In extreme cases, this may lead to violence and aggression, which may result in criminal charges. We see and investigate the extreme cases which are tragic and impact families and even communities. These cases include child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence, and death by suicide. The impact of the pandemic, as well as lockdown, although necessary, has had an effect on families. Sometimes seeking help is difficult, and it may be scary for you to accept that you need help. In order to take care of others, we need to take care of ourselves first.
And I hope you enjoyed that video and had some takeaway from it, because some days it's okay not to be okay, but reach out for help. So just to summarize everything and our discussion today, abuse can happen to anyone at any time. We need to be aware of the indicators and ask questions or act if you recognize them occurring either in yourself or someone around you. Anyone can be an abuser. There is no specific profile. Stop the cycle of silence. Too often it is ignored. We need to report abuse. And if you believe you are being abused, or if you suspect someone you know is being abused, report it to the police, a healthcare worker, or another service provider who can offer you guidance or can contact the police on your behalf. So I just wanted to thank Caregiving Matters for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today about abuse and the law. Just know that you can reach out to your local police service at any time, or if you reside in OPP jurisdiction, you can call the 888 number, 1-888-310-1122 at any time. That is the non-emergence number. But if you are in an emergency situation and someone is causing you harm right now and you need immediate assistance, call 911. Thank you and have a great day. Thank you for joining us this morning.
So that concludes our presentation on elder abuse. And a big thank you to Sergeant Tremble for presenting on this topic for us today. We do have a couple questions that are in the Q&A, and I just want to acknowledge that we have received those, and we will follow up with Sergeant Tremble on those two questions, and we'll definitely reach back out to answer those questions. And we'll also include a link to the recording of the webinar so that you can watch it later. Just to recap, this is the second in our ongoing series of 6 webinars that are going to be going on throughout the course of the year. And I encourage you to visit the caregivingmatters.ca website and look at the safety strategy for seniors landing page and register for the upcoming webinars. The next one is on Monday, August 16th at 7 p.m. And it is it's titled Safe While Out in the Community with Sergeant Carrie Schmidt of the Highway and Safety Division of the OPP. So we look forward to seeing you there for that. And once again, thank you for joining us tonight. And we will follow up with a link to the recording and the answers to those now 3 questions. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now. Have a wonderful evening.